Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Happy Thursday. Thank you for listening, whether it's on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. The guy who hid roadkill bear in New York's Central Park. The guy who cut off a whale's head and towed it around atop his vehicle with his kids. The same RFK Jr. that many folks blame for a deadly measles outbreak in American Samoa. Oh yeah, that's a thing too. That RFK Jr. could be the cabinet secretary over the Department of Health and Human Services. Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock from here in Georgia got to question RFK Jr. on some of those concerns and a few others. Here is that tense exchange.
Thank you so much, Chairman Crapo and Ranking Member Wyden. It's great to be here. Mr. Kennedy, welcome. Welcome to you and to your family. Thank you for meeting with me a few days ago. I'd like to follow up, if I might, with some of the issues that we discussed in my office. I want to talk to you first about the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I'm proud of the work that the CDC does, proud that it's located in Georgia with more than 10,000 employees in my state. If confirmed, you would be the cabinet secretary over the CDC. Representing HHS, it's about 29% of the federal budget. CDC is a part of that. Do you agree that the CDC's work is critical to Georgia, critical for our country, and the health of the entire world?
Yes, Senator.
Senator Isaacson, my Republican predecessor, would have agreed with that. Bless his memory. He was a fierce advocate for the CDC, as am I. The CDC is an agency filled with hard-working, dedicated public health servants. They wake up every single day working to keep us safe. I think we don't think often enough about their work, because it's easy not to celebrate the folks who are protecting you from that which doesn't appear because of the work that they're doing. So grateful for the work that the CDC employees do. Some of them are members of my church. I saw that deep commitment firsthand when I visited the CDC just last summer. Mr. Kennedy, you have compared the CDC's work to Nazi death camps.
Ooh.
You've compared it to sexual abusers in the Catholic Church. You've also said that many of them belong, this is a direct quote, many of them belong in jail. For me, those are disturbing characterizations of the CDC workers that I know who are trying to keep the American public safe every single day. And as you are presented as the nominee for this position, I need to know, do you stand by those statements that you made in the past, or do you retract those previous statements?
Here we go.
Senator, I don't believe that I ever compared the CDC to Nazi death camps. I support the CDC. My job is not to dismantle or harm the CDC. My job is to empower the scientists, if I'm privileged to be confirmed.
So you retract those statements?
I'm not retracting it. I never said it.
Well, actually, I have a transcript
Of me saying that it's a Nazi death camp?
Let me read your words. It says that the institution CDC and the vaccine program, is your description of their work, is more important than the children that it's supposed to protect. And you know, it's the same reason we had a pedophile scandal in the Catholic Church. It's because people were able to convince themselves that the institution of the church was more important than these little boys and girls who were being raped. That's pretty provocative language. You said in another statement to me, this is like Nazi death camp. I mean, let me finish. I'm just reading your words. I mean, what happened to these kids? 1 in 31 boys in this country, their minds are being robbed from them.
Yeah, I was not comparing the CDC to Nazi death camps. I was comparing the injury rate to our children to other atrocities. Here, and I wouldn't compare, of course, the CDC to Nazi death camps to the extent that any statement that I made has been interpreted that way. Yeah, I don't agree with that. In 2003, the United States Congress Government Oversight Committee ended an over a year investigation of the CDC and used almost that same language. They said that the CDC, just one division, one branch, the Immunization Safety Office, had put institutional self-interest and pharmaceutical profits ahead of the welfare and health of American children. So that was a conclusion by Congress. And I repeated that.
I'm asking you because you're the nominee for HHS. It sounds like you stand by those statements.
Senator, my objective is to support the CDC. There's nothing I'm going to do that is going to harm CDC. I want to make sure that our science is gold standard science, and it's free from that same Government Oversight Investigation Committee found that the panels, the ACIP panel within CDC, I think 97% of the people on it had conflicts. I don't believe that that's right. I think we need to end those conflicts and make sure that scientists are doing unobstructed science.
So I want to enter this statement, by the way, into the record without objection.
Without objection.
Last week, the White House gagged HHS and the CDC, preventing them from communicating all important public health information to anyone, including all of our allies, including our allies in the United States and global disease prevention. Can you just answer yes or no, because I'm running out of time? Do you agree with that action?
I was not consulted on it, but that's pretty much standard operating procedure for incoming administration.
So you agree with the action that gagged HHS and CDC from communicating important public health information?
That directive made sure that no public health, that only non-essential travel and mass communications were temporarily suspended pending the confirmation of a new HHS secretary. This is standard operating procedure for every administration.
I get it. I don't think what we've seen over the last several days is standard operation for new administration. I think we're seeing some unprecedented actions, but you agree with it. Last night, members of the CDC, along with other federal employees, were actually invited to resign, these buyouts. And I got text messages and folks I know who work from the CDC, for the CDC, that do this important work, who got that note. And it's really important because my experience is that when you send out that kind of note, the folks who resign are the folks who you least likely want to see resign. They got other options. They're gifted folks.
That's true.
They got a lot of expertise. They have options.
Wanted.
A lot of them are doing this work because of their patriotism, because of their commitment. Do you agree with the buyouts that were presented to CDC employees just last night?
I agree. At the vast majority of the scientists and experts at CDC are patriots and good government servants.
Can you tell me yes or no?
I don't think anybody's going to resign who's committed to making America healthy
again. Can you just answer yes? Okay, you agree with the buyouts. In our meeting, I asked you to confirm your support for the Affordable Care Act. You also mentioned that you and President Trump want to fix the ACA by making premiums more affordable. Can you answer me yes or no, as I don't have a lot of time? Did you know that tax credits that help families afford health insurance and save Georgians an average of $531 per month per person are set to expire at the end of the year? Did you know that?
I do.
We need to move on.
Do you support Congress extending these tax credits so that Americans can continue to afford health care?
Congress has to make its own decisions about that. My instructions from President
Chairman,
Trump
you're saying I'm running out of time, but I'm having a lot of trouble getting the witness to answer yes or no to a yes or no question.
Well,
And I've got one more question.
you're almost at 9 minutes, sir.
Well, I need him to answer yes or no. Yes or no? Do you
I'm not going to
support?
answer yes or no to a question that's not susceptible to an honest yes or no answer.
Okay, I can't
We
get an
need to
answer.
move on.
I think that the fact that you find it difficult to answer basic questions is deeply troubling for me as you present yourself as a nominee to run HHS. Thank you so very much.
Senator Smith.
I've been in courts all over the country, and prosecutors.
Mr. Chairman, you told me I'm out of time, and the witness continues to filibuster even after I said I'm done.
Wow. Okay, so I mentioned the measles outbreak, right? I don't know if you knew about this. Let's pivot to the exchange between Senator Ron Wyden and RFK Jr. yesterday.
My third question to you is, you made almost $5 million from book deals, mostly promoting junk science. In 2021, in a book called The Measles Book, you wrote that parents had been, quote, misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease and that measles vaccines are necessary, safe, and effective. The reality is measles are in fact deadly and highly contagious, something that you should have learned after your lies contributed to the deaths of 83 people, most of them children, in a measles outbreak in Samoa. So my question here is, Mr. Kennedy, is measles deadly, yes or no?
The death rate from measles historically in this country in 1963, the year before the introduction of the vaccine, was 1 in 10,000. Let me explain what happened in Samoa. In Samoa in 2017 or 2015, there were 2 kids who died following the MMR vaccine. And the vaccination rates in Samoa dropped precipitously from about 63% to the mid-30s, so they've never been very high. And in 2018, 2 more kids died following the MMR vaccine, and the government of Samoa banned the MMR vaccine. I arrived a year later when vaccination rates were already below any previous level. I went there, nothing to do with vaccines. I went there to introduce a medical informatics system that would digitalize records in Samoa and make health delivery much more efficient. I never gave any public statement about vaccines. You cannot find a single Samoan who will say, I didn't get a vaccine because of Bobby Kennedy. I went in June of 2019. The measles outbreak started in August. Oh, clearly I had nothing to do with the measles. Not only that,
Mr. Kennedy,
Senator, not only that, if you let me finish, Senator.
You have had some time.
If you let me finish, Senator, if you let me finish, 83 people died. When the tissue samples were sent to New Zealand, most of those people did not have measles. We don't know what was killing them. The same outbreak occurred in Tonga and Fiji, and no extra people died. There were 7 measles outbreaks in the 13 years prior to my arrival.
I just would like to get my time back. The nominee wrote a book saying that people had been misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease. He's trying now to play down his role in Samoa. That's not what the parents say. That's not what Governor Green says. It's time to make sure that we blow the whistle on actually what your views are. At least we're starting.
We need to move
Senator,
on.
I support the measles vaccine. I support the polio vaccine. I will do nothing as HHS secretary that makes it difficult or discourages people from taking either of those
Anybody
vaccines.
who believes that ought to look at the measles book you wrote saying parents have been misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease. That's not true.
Later in the day, Hawaii Governor Josh Green was on CNN with Aaron Burnett responding, basically calling RFK Jr. a liar many times.
On this situation with Samoa, which obviously is personal to you, and it is where you and he, overlapped so specifically. So you went there to vaccinate people after the measles outbreak, and obviously it's clear where you stand on what you say his role was in terms of spreading misinformation on the island that led people to be even more hesitant of getting vaccines. So when he did talk about it today, he talked a little bit more than we played with Senator Warren. All right, he's definitive there, Governor. He says, I never gave a public statement about vaccines. You can't find a Samoan who will say I didn't get a vaccine because of Bobby Kennedy. I went there, nothing to do with vaccines.
Okay, may I? He's a liar and it's bullshit. because he went there and he met with the anti-vax leader, supported that person who was spreading all of this misinformation, and that guy got arrested. And we see pictures of Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr., with the same minister that I was with. And then I was actually with people who told me that they were seeing Facebook posts demonizing vaccination programs. He started and founded and sponsored the Children's Health Defense, took $2.2 million in pay from them, and has been continuously engaging with this organization globally. He is constantly kind of squirming around the reality, which is he did not support vaccinations. He had no reason on earth to be there. And then I had to go there with 75 doctors and nurses and vaccinate 37,000 people. And they told me while I was there of how he behaved. So we all know. He's written 6 books. He'd tell you this all the time. Mm-hmm. He's written books. He's questioned vaccinations. And it's just enough to sow doubt. Because the way vaccinations work, you have to be at 95%, maybe 90%.
For herd immunity.
For herd immunity. Mm-hmm. He torpedoes it and makes it even worse, and it takes years to recover. So he is dead to rights on doing these things. And it would be fine if he was a nobody. But he's Robert Kennedy Jr., and he actually goes around the globe with these organizations making money off of referrals so that people can sue pharmaceutical companies and so on vaccinations. Now, those pharmaceutical companies, of course, are not angels. I'm not defending anybody, but they did give us a vaccine that saved millions of lives during COVID, which he also sued to try to stop. So, I mean, this guy, I can't believe he goes in front of senators or me and says these things and pretends he's okay on vaccinations.
Everyone with half a brain knows that the only reason that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. received this nomination was because he bent the knee and endorsed Donald Trump for president in 2024. And that's all it takes to win over the mind of Donald John Trump. Flattery is currency to this U.S. president. And if a few people die here or there because of some confusion about vaccines, I mean, what could go wrong with that? And this particular president, am I right? American amnesia is a legitimate problem. Unfortunately, there's no vaccine for that. And even if there were, this guy would probably have a book out by now telling you shouldn't take it. And you know what? Believe it or not, even I'm somewhat conflicted about RFK Jr. Hear me out. I'll explain. You're listening to The Ron Show on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL, Twitter, X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook. We're all over it. The thing that frustrates me about a strain in the MAGA culture right now is how, in some respects, on some things, they're not wrong. They're just wrong 20, 30 years later than, well, us, me, you. And then they want to lump us in with like all of establishment, deep state, swamp. They may be Republicans, but they distance themselves from, say, the Iraq War or perpetual war. And now their nominee for HHS has a problem with all the crap that's in our American food supply. Yeah, we've been talking about this for decades. So the one thing that I can sort of listen to RFK Jr. talk about, I'm like, he's not wrong.
Most importantly, we need to deploy NIH and FDA to doing the research to understand the relationship between these different food additives and chronic disease so that Americans understand it and make sure that Americans are aware of it. I don't want to take food away from anybody. If you like a cheeseburger, a McDonald's cheeseburger, or a Diet Coke, which my boss loves, and you should be able to get them. If you want to eat Hostess Twinkies, you should be able to do that. But you should know what the impacts are on your family and on your health. We're having epidemics of all these chronic illnesses, autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases, allergic diseases, obesity. When my uncle was president, 3% of Americans were obese. Today, 74% of Americans are obese or overweight. No other country has anything like this. In Japan, the obesity rate is still 3%. And epidemics are not caused by genes. Genes may provide the vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. Something is poisoning the American people. And we know that the primary culprits our changing food supply, the switch to highly chemical intensive processed foods. We have 10,000 ingredients in our country, in our foods. The Europeans have only 400.
See, he's he's not wrong. But the problem is, with this slice of good, you get a gob of the bad. The vaccine hesitancy, the doubt that he sowed about vaccines, et cetera, and so on, that make his nomination a non-starter. He is highly unqualified for this position, but that is the constant in the Trump cabinet appointment process in the first place. It's just stunning now that we're all in agreement that the American food industry has been poisoning our population. Folks on the left have been saying that for a long time. There have been studies that have been done by NIH and CDC, et cetera, and so on these very things for a long time. And a lot of the folks that are going to vote for RFK Jr. have sought to suppress that sort of information from coming out and cut funding from that sort of research because their donors include the Consumer Brands Association and the American Beverage Association and Tyson Foods and General Mills. This is The Ron Show.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
John Wesolowski, I hope I'm saying that right, is well known on social media. He is the Happy Urbanist. You can find him on Instagram. I know that for sure because I follow him on Instagram on a couple of my accounts. He lives in Chattanooga. He's running for city council. He is one of those folks who is, I think he'd admit, really geeky about urban design. And I'm telling you, if you enjoy that sort of thing, if you were just the sort of kid who grew up playing SimCity, even, then I think you would really enjoy following John Wesolowski on social media. Again, just follow him at The Happy Urbanist. I'll put as many of his social media links as I can find in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. I bring him to your attention because he posted something that I think deserves all the praise, that deserves all the smoke. It needs to be heard and seen as often as possible. And he speaks to, this is just in Chattanooga, Tennessee, y'all, but this is in every American city of any substance or size. The impact that immigration has had on preserving American culture. That's right. Not poisoning, wasn't that the term? Not toxifying, not de-whiting. And you know that that's the push. There's an obvious push to re-whitify this country under this administration. No, he actually makes the solid case that our immigrant community has been impactful in preserving American culture. Let's listen in.
Throughout my community, neighbors were posting pictures of these pamphlets distributed by the KKK last night. And while I was initially hesitant to platform this message by making a video of this, I decided that since the news outlets and the mayor have already made statements, I might as well. But instead, I want to center the immigrant population that's being targeted from these pamphlets. At the later part of the 19th century, Highland Park became one of Chattanooga's first suburbs. It was attractive to middle-class families who were trying to escape and find refuge from flooding that was happening downtown. It was a desirable place to live until the onset of white flight, which caused an economic downturn that increased both poverty and crime in the area. Yep. However, its mixture of affordable housing and proximity to downtown made it an attractive place for laborers and immigrants alike. And though recently it's been experiencing economic revitalization and legitimate fears of gentrification and displacement of legacy neighbors, it's important to state both the active role of the immigrant population in this neighborhood and the role it has played in preserving this neighborhood.
That's right.
You see, one of the biggest threats to the built environment whenever it experiences an economic downturn is what is sometimes called demolition by neglect. Buildings and spaces that fall into such a state of disrepair, it makes more sense to tear them down than to fix them. It is only through the continual occupancy of buildings that older buildings and places are preserved. And it is therefore the presence of working class people and immigrants that have inhabited this neighborhood for decades that is responsible for preserving what has become one of Chattanooga's premier neighborhoods. Typically, when we think of immigrant contributions to the workforce, we tend to overemphasize the agricultural and rural contributions. But it was in reading Max Podinsky's A Paradise of Small Homes that I was reminded that it's more than that. In it, he points out that the contributions of immigrants to cities can't be overstated, both in the building of small businesses and housing, which were by and large built by the working class and immigrant population. When I first moved into this neighborhood, there was a large supermarket that was the primary location in which people in this area bought groceries. When the city became proud of opening up a urban grocery store downtown from the same chain, they promptly closed one in my neighborhood, making it a veritable food desert. Except it wasn't. Scattered throughout my community and neighboring communities of Oak Grove, Ridgedale, and Eastlake were tiendas, small grocery stores that popped up in old auto garages, manufacturing buildings that offer things like butchers and fresh fruit and vegetables. That is to say, it is these tiendas from the Guatemalan community just south of my house that kept my home from being in a food desert. What's more, it's the continual occupation of these types of buildings and old dilapidated homes that have been fixed up and turned into pupuserias and taquerias that is preserving these buildings. It is this sort of incremental development that needs to be leveraged throughout our city, not just here, to make it a vibrant source of culture and a lively place to inhabit. The scapegoating of problems in our society on immigrants isn't something new. In the mid to late 1800s, it was the Chinese who were seen as job competition and blamed for economic downturn. It was the Irish, Eastern Europeans, and Polish and Italians that also got blamed. And most recently, it's South Americans. Now, you may not know this, but my last name is Wesolowski. My dad's mom is also from the Czech Republic. My mom's mom was Irish. My mom's dad was Italian. You can see where I'm going from this. I come from a lot of different types of immigrants that were scapegoated throughout history. The fact of the matter is, this is one of the weirdest places to try to distribute pamphlets like this, in part because my neighborhood is both enriched by and truly thankful for the contributions of the Guatemalan community nearby. If this is something that's upset you, there are groups in town, one called Turk and one in my neighborhood called La Paz, that create resources for people in this community that might be experiencing fear as a result of this propaganda.
Again, he's running for city council in the city of Chattanooga, and I wish him well. Not only do you need to have that kind of education, that kind of background, that kind of knowledge of legitimate American history, how we are an accumulation, a tapestry, a mosaic of cultures that many don't see beyond the color of one's skin, but also because, again, he's an urban design nerd, and I hope he doesn't mind me calling that. I think he is a super. We American cities of any size, and Chattanooga's not a small city. It's a growing. It's a beautiful city too, by the way. It's a city of that size, some smaller, some larger. I lived in Alexandria, Louisiana, not a very large city. Cities of any size or substance, or towns that profess to want to be that picturesque American town. Every city council needs a John Wesolowski on its council to not only remind folks of what made the city they're in from a historical perspective, but also to provide a blueprint of what a well-designed city can be. He's a fantastic follow. Again, the Happy Urbanist. You definitely want to try and follow him on social media if that's sort of urban design. It needs to be scratched on your part. He's a very smart guy. He talked a lot about neighborhoods that were left in disrepair due to white flight. I mean, there's just so many things that make complete sense that you can deign from just that social media post. White flight left American cities in disrepair. Who swept in and filled the vacuum? African Americans, immigrants. And while a lot of those inner cities were left to rot and in disrepair and had to be propped up by smaller businesses to serve the communities left behind. And by the way, I'm a gay man. Let me just throw us in here. The LGBTQ plus, that's right. A lot of America's cities of any size have a gay neighborhood, right? I mean, you don't think that that's by accident, do you? I mean, there was a void. There were homes in disrepair. Yes, African Americans, the immigrant community, the LGBTQ plus, all, now reside in cities throughout America. Collectively, we're so diverse, and it just disgusts the conservative white subculture that fled for the suburbs and raise their offspring. It just makes complete sense why they cannot stand, why they look at urban communities with such disgust and derision and see the property values go up after they left it. Hey, finders keepers, right? Losers, MAGA. There's just so much that you can derive from that post that I just felt that I needed to share that. And while we're seeing, we presume that there's a spike in ICE activity. I mean, I know we have now quotas. We have quotas now on ICE raids and deportations, and I presume that we are seeing a rise in those numbers, although I'm trying to remember who it was. Maybe it was last week, and it's too soon to really speak on that the numbers really hadn't changed all that much. So I'm going to presume that there probably has been a rise in the number of arrests and deportations. I think it's important what Wozolowski shared, that we do so at the peril of ripping seams from the fabric of our American culture that already make us great, that make our cities great. And don't think that this is an accident, by the way, when you think about how rural and suburban, largely Republican, conservative, MAGA-aligned voters feel about the American city and its diversity, and this push to undo that diversity and to create havoc in the cities that they are so far removed from, they think they'll feel no repercussion from. And I like the fact that he also kind of ushered us away from constantly talking about how the immigrant community only impacts our food industry and agriculture and construction. That's a little bit of a crutch that I think we on the left have to work ourselves away from. But at the same time, the food supply and grocery prices were such key components to the 2024 election. Home prices, again, key components to the outcome of the 2024 election. You can't not talk about it. You can't not bring that up and say, this isn't going to help. That's not going to help inflation. And I haven't even talked about the tariffs, which, by the way, are up for grabs on the table when it comes to the current president's deportation efforts as well. I just wanted to point out that in all the hullabaloo about mass deportations and the writing of the immigrant community, which, I mean, is as much a part of American history as the fife and drum, the chopping down of the cherry tree, the powdered wigs. Yeah, deriding immigrants is just part of what this country was built on. The backs of the immigrants that are being derided and the notion that they are to blame for what is wrong with our country. That's just part of what America is and has been throughout history. And it's sad. And we're going through it again. This is The Ron Show, America One Radio, progressive voices via TuneIn. I've talked a good bit over the last couple of weeks, months maybe, about Nancy Mace, the representative in Congress from the Charleston metropolitan area in South Carolina. She's pretty ingrained in South Carolina. In fact, she has a long and she should be proud of her history as the first woman to ever graduate from the Citadel, just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. She didn't hesitate to say so and posted her graduation photo. And this was how many days ago? It's 3 days ago she posted this. Photo of her graduation and, in the full regalia. I didn't fight like hell to become the first woman to graduate from the Citadel just for some man in a miniskirt to take away that achievement. Protecting women's accomplishments isn't a political talking point for me. It's personal, she says. This is the woman who has aligned herself with a president and a political party that loathes diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI. Dismantling it at every turn, wherever they can. A woman who benefited from said DEI efforts, but doesn't see the hypocrisy in her decrying DEI, wants up the treehouse. She's up the treehouse and now is part of the crew that is pulling the rope ladder up to ensure that DEI doesn't benefit anyone else. White women don't understand. Well, I'm not going to generalize or stereotype because I'm not saying that all white women, I shouldn't say that. Conservative white women like Nancy Mace don't seem to understand or don't care that DEI efforts have aided white women along with people of color, the LGBTQ+. They're okay, apparently, if it benefits them, but not others. I mean, if that ain't MAGA, if that ain't Republican, I don't know what is. And by the way, do I taint her achievement as the first woman to graduate from this? No, I shouldn't. I shouldn't. However, I should also point out that she got her diploma from a fellow by the name of Brigadier General Emory Mace. Same last name, huh? Back in 1999. Emory Mace, the commandant of cadets, retired about 4 months after she got that degree, that diploma. That's right. Nancy Mace got her diploma from her father, Brigadier General Emory Mace. In 1999, he retired later that year. So I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that DEI was what got her where she was, but it was. And anybody who remembers, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when just allowing a female into the Citadel was, to quote Joe Biden, a big fucking deal. And I remember conservatism pushed back. Nancy Mace benefited from progressives and liberals pushing to crack the door open. And now Nancy Mace is part of that same conservative culture that just 30 years ago or so was pushing to keep her out. She's now part of the crew that wants to push the door shut to keep others out. She got hers. She's up the treehouse. Now pull the rope up. Nobody else is allowed in. That's disturbing. But that's Nancy Mace, the former supporter of the LGBTQ+ when she was just a local politician running to earn as many local votes as possible, who is now an anti-trans MAGA bigot. And look, the irony is not lost on just me. She's even getting trolled by far-right activists. In Yahoo News, Ariel Messman-Rucker definitely pointing out that the likes of Matt Walsh, that's right, far-right political commentator and fellow MAGA supporter Matt Walsh, Messman-Rucker writes, was quick to call out the congresswoman for using the same arguments he claims trans women use to invade, quote, male-only spaces and for being, quote, a DEI beneficiary. He tweeted, the girl boss feminism routine isn't just cringy, it also directly undermines our argument. The Citadel was a male-only space forced by law to admit females in the name of diversity and inclusion. That is the exact argument trans-identifying males use to invade female spaces. Messman-Rucker continues, MAGA supporters wasted no time cannibalizing their own party when conservatives on X started to call out her brand of feminism as being part of a, quote, slippery slope that allowed women to take over men's spaces, while other Republicans started to question whether she might actually be a man just pretending to be a woman, something Mace has accused transgender women of doing. This is delicious. Listen to this tweet. Nancy Mace absolutely helped make this mess we're in by forcing herself into a traditionally men's-only school. She was part of the slippery slope that has led us to where we are today. Why does she not seem to get that? Why keep bragging about it? Oh, this is chef's kiss. Breaking, Nancy Mace thanks DEI without knowing she was helped by DEI. Vocal Trump critic Alex Cole wrote on X, while other people quipped that, quote, white women are the affirmative action queens and that they love it when MAGA turns on itself. Oh, you know I'm going to give that to you in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. I will have more, I presume, maybe to discuss about the deadly plane crash. By the way, we don't have an FAA director. The FAA director resigned after Trump was inaugurated. But I'll have more on that perhaps tomorrow. And it's gut-wrenching, heartbreaking. It's curious. I'm not going to lie. I think it's somewhat curious. But I don't... I'm going to leave on this note. I want to speak more about American journalism and what we're losing every time we lose a Jim Acosta. First of all, this was his sign-off from its final show. You know, he was relegated to like a midnight time slot by CNN execs who, in some respects, are bending the knee, kissing the ring of an incoming administration. Jim Acosta has signed off and said, I'm not taking that time slot. Nope, I'll leave first. And he's headed to Substack, and thank goodness for that. Here's how he signed off.
Just wanted to end today's show by thanking all of the wonderful people who work behind the scenes at this network. You may have seen some reports about me and the show. And after giving all of this some careful consideration and weighing an alternative time slot CNN offered me, I've decided to move on. I am grateful to CNN for the nearly 18 years I've spent here doing the news. People often ask me if the highlight of my career at CNN was at the White House covering Donald Trump. Actually, no. That moment came here when I covered former President Barack Obama's trip to Cuba in 2016 and had the chance to question the dictator there, Raul Castro, about the island's political prisoners. As the son of a Cuban refugee, I took home this lesson. It is never a good time to bow down to a tyrant.
That part.
I've always believed it's the job of the press to hold power to account. I've always tried to do that here at CNN, and I plan on doing all of that in the future. One final message. Don't give in to the lies. Don't give in to the fear. Hold on to the truth and to hope. Even if you have to get out your phone, record that message. Mm-hmm. I will not give in to the lies. I will not give in to the fear. Post it on your social media so people can hear from you too. I'll have more to say about my plans in the coming days, but until then, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. It has been an honor to be welcomed into your home for all these years. That's the news. Reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta.
We're losing a real one there, y'all. You know, when I launched this podcast a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago or so, it was October 2022. I did so for personal edification. For one, my therapist and I decided, well, this is something you should do. You should pursue this. And so I did. But I also decided to do this because I saw a void in the audio spectrum. And obviously, we see now the ramifications of that void, especially in the podcast sphere. But when you talk about, like, if you want to see this as a talk radio show, I am on online radio stations, but when you want to see this from just a radio lens, yeah, there's a void. There is a vacuum of truth and honesty and calling it as it is. And so I decided to launch this show, not because I was a fan of Jim Acosta or anything like that. I just decided to do this show because there was this vacuum, and I've decided not to give in to the lies. In fact, to give you an alternative to the lies. You'll not hear me say something if it's incorrect and not correct myself at some point in time. That's just not who I am. I'm not going to present what appears to be a lie by omitting the truth. I think that anyone who lies by omission is lying. And I will call out anyone who does that. Left, center, right. You leave out key details. I'm going to provide those details. I may not say that those who don't are lying by omission, but know that that's what you're doing. You are lying by omission. And that will not happen on this show. No, I'm not a journalist. I thought I was going to be one when I was growing up. Ran a small newspaper as a kid. worked on my high school newspaper, was going to go to J school at UGA, got into radio instead. But I'm going to remember the journalistic ethics that I picked up along the way in those roles and continue to do that here on this show. And I wish Jim Acosta well, and I'm frightened for what our journalistic community is shaping up to look like in the Trump regime. It's going to do it for today's Ron Show. Show notes, as always, at ronshowatl.com. Weekdays, 9 a.m., 5 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Take care.